Hello, music lovers, and welcome to the channel. Thanks for coming by, and I want to give a big thanks to everybody who has helped this channel hit 1,000 subscribers. That is just amazing, and I love the comments. You guys are so great. I love the chatter and the discussion. I can really tell that there's a core audience here that is really, really cool, and you know, it's okay to disagree and to have differences of opinion. You know, some of my friends, you know, we don't see eye to eye. Some of them laugh at what I listen to, and, you know, I laugh at what they listen to. We bust each other's balls, but at the end of the day, there's a respect, and I think that I see a lot of that here. So I hope that that keeps up, all right? Now, in this video, I wanted to talk about some notable guest appearances that have been made by various members of the band Yes. Over the past 50 years, they've played on many albums and songs from various artists. Some of them have been pretty major, and maybe you don't know about them or you had forgotten about them. But I'm talking about specifically Alan White, Rick Wakeman, Steve Howe, and Jon Anderson. Now, all of them are still active members of Yes in one way or another. As you may know, Yes is currently split up into two camps, and they're both touring this summer. And actually, just talked to a friend of mine earlier, and looks like I'm going to be checking out Yes next week. They're playing in Richmond next Tuesday. And so probably we'll be checking them out. I'm talking about the one with Steve Howe and Alan White, and who else is in that band? Jeff Downes, Billy Sherwood, and John Davison, who is filling in, I guess, or taking over the vocal duties. And so that should be interesting to see how that goes, and I'll of course let you know. But in this video, like I said, I'm going to be talking about some notable guest appearances and some cameos. I got a chance to meet some of these guys too. Alan White is up first. I got to meet Alan and Chris Squire actually at a show in Connecticut on the Ladder Tour. And I got to find that interview. I really do. I got to find the one with Steve Howe too. But anyway, Alan White is a great guy. He's such a down-to-earth dude. Very, very friendly. And he got a really big break back in 1969 after John Lennon was done with the Beatles, or the Beatles was done with him. However you want to look at that whole thing, the Beatles kind of collapsed on itself. And the first thing that John Lennon did outside of the Beatles was with the Plastic Ono Band. He played this concert in Toronto, and he was looking to get some guys to play with him, Eric Clapton being one of them. And he had seen Alan White playing in a band in a club or something, and Alan doesn't really quite know why John chose him. As a matter of fact, when John Lennon called Alan White to see if he wanted to join him, Alan thought it was a joke and like put the phone down. And so John called him back and was like, no, I would like to work with you. And so Alan got on that gig in Toronto. Actually, that came out. That was like an official album that came out too. And then John Lennon asked Alan to play some drums on his next album, which was the one that had Imagine. So that's Alan White on the song Imagine, which was, yeah, it was kind of like a minor hit for John Lennon. He also played on Instant Karma. You know, then that song, the drums on that song are very, very prominent. And I would like to think that that gig looked good on his resume and probably helped land him a gig with another Beatle who was taking his first venture outside the Beatles, George Harrison. George Harrison came out with his first solo album in 1970 called All Things Must Pass. And, you know, George Harrison was kind of felt slighted in the Beatles. You know, the Beatles was mostly a Lennon and McCartney thing. They wrote most of the songs. Every now and then, you know, you would get a George Harrison song or two on a Beatles album. So, you know, he had a bunch of songs that he had been saving up. And so when the Beatles broke up, George Harrison just had a shitload of songs. I mean, his first album was like, it was like a triple album. And he had all these people helping him out. I mean, you take a look at who was playing on that album. It's a who's who, you know. Ringo was on it, Clapton. I remember when Phil Collins put his book out recently, he talked about how he went down and he played on it. But then when the album came out, he wasn't on it. Like George Harrison just didn't include him, and he felt kind of slighted. But Alan White is on this album, and he plays on this song called I'd Have You Anytime. And this is a song you may recall if you saw my Paul McCartney video, I talked about it. One of my favorite Paul McCartney songs is one called Let Me Roll It. and it was inspired by this song. And this song actually has the lyric in it, "Let Me Roll It." And it's a star-studded affair. It was co-written by Bob Dylan. You've got Eric Clapton playing guitar. Of course, Alan White's on drums. And the production is with Phil Spector. Phil Spector, of course, legendary producer from the 60s, known for his wall of sound, you know, married to Ronnie Spector. And so, you know, that was another feather in Alan's cap. You know, he was, you know, a 20-year-old guy, you know, right out of the gate playing with some of the biggest legends of all time in rock music. And then he joins Yes in 1973. So that was really cool. And of course, Alan White joins Yes after their drummer Bill Bruford left to go join King Crimson. So another notable Yes guest appearance or cameo is going to be from Rick Wakeman, the famed keyboard player. Now, before he joined Yes in the early 70s, he was a studio guy, and he played with David Bowie, most notably on his song Space Oddity. Remember that one? Yeah, just another minor classic rock nugget there. David Bowie loved Rick so much that he worked with Rick over the years, time and time again, on and off. He even asked Rick to join his band, the Spiders from Mars, but it was on the same day that he was asked to join Yes. And of course, we know what choice Rick made for that one. And you know, I never got a chance to meet Rick. I would have loved to. He's a real funny guy. He's got a real good sense of humor. He's always putting smiles on people's faces. And I could see why a guy like Bowie and his producer, Tony Visconti, would want to keep a guy like Rick around. He also worked with Cat Stevens in 1971 on a song called Morning Has Broken. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Cat Stevens. He was recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I remember Cat Stevens is one of my earliest memories of music. My father used to play his greatest hits album when I was just like, I don't know, I must have been about 5 years old, and I remember a lot of those songs from the 70s. So I was listening to Morning Has Broken, and I think it's just got some really beautiful piano work on it. I encourage you to check it out. And as always, I put together a playlist with a lot of these great tunes in there. Be sure to check it out down below. And something else that Rick did many, many years later, he worked with Ozzy Osbourne on his album Osmosis. And he played the Mellotron on the track called Perry Mason. And what's interesting about that song is that Ozzy Osbourne, of course, is on tour now, and and I did a whole video about Ozzy's set list. I did a whole review of that, and he's playing this song. And who is playing keyboards on tour with him? It's not Rick, but it is his son, Adam Wakeman. So I thought that was pretty cool that Adam is playing his father's parts on that tune. So yeah, between Rick Wakeman and Alan White, lots of great classic rock staples in there to chew on, huh? Also, we've got Steve Howe, the legendary guitarist for Yes, and probably one of the reasons why you would want to go see them this summer. He's had some notable guest appearances too. One of the most notable is on a album called Welcome to the Pleasure Dome by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. You may recall they had a big hit single with Relax and Two Tribes. And I talked about this in my video about Trevor Horn. I'll put a link up for that. Trevor Horn used to be in Yes. He was in a band called the Buggles, Video Killed a Radio Star. Then he went on to produce Yes. He produced Owner of A Lonely Heart, and then he went on to produce a lot of other bands in the 80s, giving them some of their signature albums. Frankie Goes to Hollywood is no exception. And so, of course, he's working on this album with Frankie. And, Trevor is just great. I mean, the album was kind of tough going. He basically told the guys, look, why don't you go take a walk? I'm going to work on this. And, Holly Johnson and those guys, they came back and they were just blown away by what Trevor Horn had done. Just the production on that album is brilliant. Trevor asked Steve to play acoustic on the title cut, which is an epic song. It's like a 13-minute song, Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. You got to check it out. Steve Howe actually got to perform it live with Frankie Goes to Hollywood in the Trevor Horn tribute concert. So that was a major thing for Steve. And then also one of my favorite cameos was on a Queen album which was the last studio album that they made with Freddie. I'm not talking about the Made in Heaven album that was kind of put together after Freddie died. I didn't like that. I'm talking about the last album that the band made, all four of them. The Innuendo album, the title track is epic. It's an amazing song. It's probably the last great Queen epic. It sounds like it could have been on like a night at the opera. It's got this operatic section, then it goes into this flamenco acoustic part in the middle, and that is Steve Howe. Queen happened to be in Montreux along with Steve Howe at the same time, and Brian May and Steve Howe were talking, and Brian May was like, look, there's this part in this song and we want you to do the guitars, because Brian May didn't feel like he could do it. And so it's just a brilliant piece in there that Steve Howe put down there. Really, really like that. And then another interesting cameo by Steve Howe is on an album by this band called Animal Logic. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this band, but they were pretty cool. They came out in the early 90s, and it was made up of Stuart Copeland, formerly of the Police, on drums, and also Stanley Clarke, the famous jazz bass player. And then they got together with this singer, kind of like an unknown singer. I think she was like a school teacher or something. Her name was Deborah Holland, and she just had an amazing voice. I remember when I first heard this band, I loved Deborah's voice. And it sounds kind of like the Police. It's kind of got that kind of an energy to it. They didn't have a guitar player, so there were a lot of guest players on their couple of albums. They only did a couple of albums before it just kind of fizzled out. But Steve Howe adds some guitars to a song called Spy in the House of Love from their first album. I'm not exactly sure what he did, because it's him and someone else playing on the song, but I think you can probably hear what Steve brought to that song. It's really, really cool. Like I said, I'm going to put all of this stuff downstairs so you can check it out. But I am curious to see if any of you guys have heard of the Animal Logic Band and what you think of that tune. And finally, we got Jon Anderson, the original vocalist for the band Yes. He has done a lot of guest appearances over the years, way too many for me to talk about. I'm sure maybe you've got a favorite, let me know. But one that stands out to me is when he did some vocals on a song by Toto called Stop Loving You, which was actually a single. And this was a time when they were kind of scratching each other's back. You know, John did this album called In the City of Angels. I think it was around 88 or so. And Toto was pretty much his backing band on that album. David Page even co-wrote a couple songs on that album. And so Jon Anderson did background vocals specifically on the chorus of that song. And he also does some scat vocal during the breakdown of it. It's pretty cool. Like I said, I'm going to drop all that down below. And then, of course, I can't forget the guest appearance that Jon Anderson made on King Crimson's album Lizard. Now, I really wasn't going to include this because I don't think it's very good, but I know that the proggers out there are going to be like, how could you miss Jon Anderson's guest appearance on Crimson's album? Crimson, their third album was a bit of a strange bird. They had just lost Greg Lake, who was the vocalist on the first couple of albums. He went on to form Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and the band was just kind of in disarray. Jon Anderson does vocals on this song called Prince Rupert Awakes, and Robert Fripp has even talked about how he felt sorry for Jon Anderson. Like, I think he even said that he sung the unsingable, or something to that effect. The album was not very well received. They've been playing some of it live in their shows currently, but they've reworked the songs to make them a whole lot better. I actually enjoy them more now than I do on the album. But Jon Anderson sings that song. It's very oddball, but yeah, there's many other things that John's done. And so I'm curious to hear what your favorite guest appearances are from any of these guys or others. Of course, there's many other guys that are in Yes. I'm just picking what I think are some of the most notable, but definitely drop below what some of your favorite guest appearances and cameos have been from members of the band Yes. And, you know, one of the things that kind of struck me about this was karma. You know, And by that, I mean, it seems like, I've heard people talk about karma, and it's often come across as like this magical thing, like, these things just kind of happen to you, like good things just kind of happen to you, or maybe even bad things just kind of happen to you, like it's some kind of a magical thing, no explanation why. But I never really bought into that. I think that when you do good things and you are a good person and you show others respect, and you work hard, I think that you create an environment that breeds good things happening back to you. And it goes the other way too. If you're an asshole and you burn your bridges and you don't treat people with respect, it can come back to you. There's another expression, don't shit where you eat. And I think that that's what karma really is. To try to be good and do good things, and you just set up. I mean, there's not a guarantee that anything great is going to happen, but the odds are more in your favor that something good is going to happen when you do good. And so that's one of the lessons that I kind of pulled out of this, because if you look over the years, Alan White did very well with Lennon. He gets the gig with George Harrison. He winds up in Yes. Wakeman works with Bowie. He got all kinds of gigs, wound up in Yes. Steve Howe worked with Trevor Horn. Now Trevor Horn's asking him to come and play on Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Jon Anderson, working with Toto, Scratch My Back, I'll Scratch Yours. Lots of good vibes and lots of good karma, and that's what I think it's about. And so, curious to see what you think about it. Put your comments below. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you like it, hit the subscribe button. Once again, thank you for 1,000. I love you guys, all right? And I'll talk to you later.